how we see the world. Is that person cutting us off? Are they an idiot? Or are they going to the hospital for an emergency? But in that pressure moment, we can jump to conclusion, which we'll talk about in a little bit. We do that based on less than 5% of available information. And all of a sudden, that drives so much of our behavior. There's this myth of pressure. This is maybe the first and most important part of chapter 1 in the book, which is that most people think that some people rise to the occasion. Some people do better under pressure. Would you agree? Yeah, there are people who do better under pressure. I hate to break it to you, but it's a myth. It's wrong. It's not true. Pressure diminishes our thinking ability, our ability to manage emotions, our ability to retrieve memory. And if you look at in chapter 1, there's a whole section on how it diminishes creativity, teamwork, and on and on. In sport, we know no NBA player shoots a better free throw when they're under pressure at the end of the game than their season average. Same with clutch hitting in baseball, and I could go on and on. Now, this may seem like a negative message. It's not. What it's meant to say is the data tells us that nobody does better under pressure. So what's the aha about that? Well, what that should mean to you is that you have to manage it differently. You got to try and minimize pressure's effect on you. That's very different. All of us are in these bubbles of thinking every day. How many thoughts do you think each one of us have in our bubbles of thinking a day? How many thoughts a day do you think we have? According to the best research we know right now, we have about 60,000 thoughts a day. According to a female colleague of mine, men only have one thought a day. 60,000 times a day. And I'm sure it was the same with your exceptional leader. What was it about them that really made that difference, that had that influence on you? Well, the truth is, it's not how smart they were, not how technically astute they were. Now, let's be clear. You need a certain amount, right? There's a bar that you need to cross. You need a certain amount. We call it a threshold capability of IQ, let's say. But once you cross that threshold, any more IQ doesn't give you a big advantage. Does that make sense? It's the difference between what we call an entrance criteria and an excellence criteria. IQ is an entrance. Once you get your foot in the door, you get the job, IQ ceases to become a predictor of who will be a high performer. Let me give you an example. Somebody who says it better than I. Warren Buffett said, if you've got an IQ of 150, take 30, sell it, get some value for it. As only Warren Buffett can, right? Let's unlock potential here. Like, you have enough, you're in the room. And by the way, at age 16, your IQ is fairly concrete. You won't increase it very much. My daughter just turned 17. I had to break it to her. Bridget, hate to say it, but you're not going to increase your IQ now. Even if you're not a basketball fan, you'll see that the story does transfer. So that team, who's on that team? Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, Dennis the Circus Rodman, right? Coached by who? Phil Jackson. Not a bad basketball coach, right? That team, if you ask basketball historians today, they will tell you it was not the most talented team of their generation. It wasn't. They lacked a big man, a really strong center. Here's what they did especially well. The game would be over, the team would come into the dressing room, the door would close, the media's on the outside. And in that dressing room, let me ask you a question. What do you think? Who was the first person to freely admit making a mistake in the game? Michael Jordan's a great answer, and he was pretty good at it, but there's one person who led the way. Coach, absolutely. Phil Jackson would step in there and he wouldn't go, Rodman, what were you doing? Or Pippen, he'd go in there and he'd say, guys, you know what? I should have.